What if I told you that in 2026, you can legally buy a house in Australia for under $50,000 in a country where the average home price is pushing past $900,000? That sounds impossible, right? Even more shocking, these houses aren't hidden in the desert or falling apart ruins. Some are within reach of major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane. So why aren't people lining up to buy them? Here's the disturbing truth. Price is not the problem. In fact, thousands of these homes have been sitting unsold for years. No bidding wars, no investors, no families moving in. And once you understand the real reasons most real estate ads never mention, you might realize these cheap properties aren't bargains at all. They're warnings. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover could completely change how you see cheap property in Australia. Number 10. Around Byron Bay, the illusion of proximity. At first glance, this might be the most confusing one on the list. Byron Bay is one of Australia's most expensive, desirable, and internationally famous coastal destinations. Homes here sell for millions. Tourists flood in year-round, and the lifestyle looks like a dream. So how is it possible that just an hour or two away, you can find houses selling for $50,000 or less? The answer lies in what I call the illusion of proximity, the dangerous belief that being near a wealthy location automatically means opportunity. These nearby towns are often marketed as Byron adjacent or just outside Byron Bay, but the reality on the ground is very different. Yes, they might look close on a map, but distance isn't measured in kilometers, it's measured in access. Many of these towns have no public transport, limited healthcare, few full-time jobs, and almost no local economy beyond seasonal tourism. When the tourists leave, the money leaves with them. Research on regional housing shows that towns without diversified employment shrink fast, even when they sit near wealthy hubs. Locals commute long hours for low-paying service jobs, fuel costs eat into income, and younger residents move away permanently. Over time, schools close, businesses shut down, and property demand collapses. That's how you end up with cheap houses sitting unsold for years, even near paradise. The most painful part? Buyers often think they're making a smart move, believing Byron Bay's growth will spill over. But growth doesn't spill, it stops at infrastructure. If a town isn't directly connected to jobs, hospitals, and transport, it gets left behind, no matter how beautiful the coastline is. The lesson here is simple but critical. Never confuse lifestyle branding with livability. A cheap house near a famous place doesn't mean access to that life. It often means isolation with a postcard view. If this section opened your eyes, hit like, subscribe for more real, no-hype breakdowns of Australia's hidden housing traps, and comment below, would you risk buying near a dream location if the price was this low? Number 9. Near Gold Coast, tourist towns with no tourists. The Gold Coast is usually associated with luxury apartments, crowded beaches, and non-stop development, so it feels almost unbelievable that nearby towns can have houses priced at $50,000 in 2026. But once you move just outside the bright lights and beachfront strip, a very different reality appears. These are towns that were built almost entirely around tourism-driven hope, and when that hope dried up, so did everything else. Many of these communities depended on seasonal visitors, holiday rentals, or short-term construction booms. When tourism slowed, rental demand collapsed. When investors pulled out, jobs vanished. Research into regional economies shows that towns relying on a single industry, especially tourism, are among the most fragile. One bad season, one economic shock, or one shift in travel trends can hollow them out almost overnight. The houses themselves often look fine from the outside, solid structures, quiet streets, decent-sized blocks. But the problem isn't the building, it's the absence of daily life. Shops close early or permanently, medical services are limited or hours away, public transport is minimal, and full-time, stable work is rare. What's left is a place that feels temporary, even though the houses are permanent. Another overlooked factor is short-term rental oversupply. When too many properties were converted into holiday lets, long-term residents were priced out or pushed away. Then, tourism demand fell, leaving empty homes with no local buyers to replace them. Prices dropped sharply, but demand never returned. This is how you end up with cheap houses near one of Australia's most famous coastlines that nobody wants, not because they're ugly or unsafe, but because a town without people, jobs, and services isn't a bargain, it's a warning. Near the Gold Coast, the lesson is clear. Tourism can build towns quickly, but it can also abandon them just as fast. Number 8. Beyond Sydney, when distance becomes the real cost. Sydney is one of the most expensive cities on the planet, so it sounds logical to think that if you move far enough away, prices should eventually make sense. And they do on paper. In 2026, there are towns several hours beyond Sydney where houses sell for $50,000 or less. To many buyers, this feels like a clever escape from insane prices. But what looks cheap on a listing often becomes very expensive in real life. The biggest cost isn't the house, it's distance. Studies on regional commuting show that once daily travel exceeds a certain threshold, people experience higher stress, lower job stability, and increased living expenses. Fuel, vehicle wear, missed opportunities, and lost time quietly drain money every single week. A cheap house doesn't help if you're spending hours just to access work, healthcare, or basic services. These towns are often marketed as within reach of Sydney, but reach is a misleading word. There may be no reliable public transport, limited mobile coverage, and few local employers. If you lose your job, there's no backup market. If you get sick, the nearest major hospital might be hours away. Over time, young people leave, schools shrink, and businesses close, pushing demand even lower. Another overlooked issue is time poverty. Long-distance living steals hours from your life, hours that could be spent with family, building skills, or earning more income. Research consistently shows that excessive commuting reduces life satisfaction more than almost any other factor, including income. This is why so many homes beyond Sydney remain unsold for years. Buyers realize too late that they didn't escape high costs. They just changed the form of payment from money to time, energy, and isolation. Number 7. On the fringe of Melbourne, industrial towns left behind. Melbourne is often ranked as one of the world's most livable cities, but that reputation fades quickly once you move far enough beyond its outer edges. In 2026, there are towns on Melbourne's fringe where houses sell for around $50,000, and the reason isn't mystery, it's history. Many of these towns were built around factories, warehouses, or single major employers that no longer exist. When the jobs disappeared, the people followed, and property values never recovered. For decades, these communities thrived on manufacturing. Workers lived close to plants, shops stayed busy, and schools were full. But as industries automated, moved overseas, or shut down entirely, employment collapsed. Research in urban planning consistently shows that housing demand is directly tied to job density, not city branding. Being near Melbourne means nothing if there's no economic engine pulling people in. The houses themselves often tell a deceptive story. They're usually solid, brick builds, wide streets, decent land sizes. To an outsider, they look like incredible bargains, but daily life reveals the problem. Public transit is infrequent or unreliable. Local businesses struggle to survive. Younger residents leave for education and never return. Over time, the population ages, services shrink, and entire streets feel frozen in time. Another critical issue is skill mismatch. Even when new jobs appear closer to Melbourne, residents in these towns may not have the training or transport access to reach them. That gap keeps unemployment high and discourages new buyers. Investors avoid the area, Families choose suburbs with better schools, and prices remain stuck at the bottom. This is how towns just outside one of Australia's strongest cities end up with shockingly cheap homes. It's not about distance, it's about relevance. When a town loses its role in the modern economy, cheap housing isn't a solution, it's simply the market admitting that demand has quietly disappeared. Number 6. Outside Canberra, when government jobs don't reach you. Canberra is known for stability. Government salaries, secure employment, and predictable growth give the impression that anything nearby should benefit from that safety net. Yet in 2026, there are towns just outside Canberra where houses sell for around $50,000, and the reason surprises many first-time buyers. Government stability is highly centralized, and when you fall outside that center, the benefits disappear fast. These towns were once expected to grow alongside the capital. Developers assumed public service expansion would spill outward, bringing jobs, services, and population growth. But research on employment clustering shows the opposite often happens. Government work concentrates tighter over time, not wider. Jobs stay inside the city, while surrounding towns are left with limited employment options and long commutes. The daily reality in these areas is quietly difficult. There are few local employers beyond basic retail or manual work. Public transit into Canberra is sparse or unreliable, making car ownership mandatory. Healthcare access is limited, and specialist services often require travel back into the city. Over time, younger residents leave for education or work and never return, accelerating population decline. Housing prices reflect this imbalance. Even though the buildings are livable and the streets are calm, demand remains weak because the towns offer no independent economic purpose. They exist in the shadow of Canberra without being plugged into its core systems. Studies on regional development consistently show that towns dependent on a single nearby city without their own job base are among the most vulnerable to stagnation. Another overlooked factor is risk exposure. If a household relies entirely on one income tied to Canberra, a single job loss can be devastating when there are no local alternatives. That risk alone keeps many buyers away. This is how homes end up shockingly cheap near Australia's political heart. Proximity to power doesn't guarantee opportunity. Without access, infrastructure, and local employment, these towns become reminders that being close is not the same as being connected. Number 5. Remote towns linked to Perth, mining boom towns that went bust. Western Australia is famous for its resource wealth, and Perth often benefits from mining booms that push wages and property prices higher. But far beyond the city, there were remote towns where houses sell for around $50,000 in 2026, and the reason is a hard lesson in economic dependence. These towns were built for one purpose: to serve nearby mines. When the mines slowed, automated, or shut down, the towns were left behind almost overnight. During boom years, demand was intense. Workers flooded in, rents skyrocketed, and homes were snapped up at inflated prices. But mining is cyclical by nature. Research into resource-based economies shows that when a single industry dominates, housing markets become extremely fragile. Once operations scale back or shift to fly-in, fly-out models, permanent residents disappear. What remains is housing with no long-term demand. The physical condition of these towns often shocks first-time buyers. Roads are wide, houses are spacious, and infrastructure was once modern. But daily life tells a different story. Local shops close due to lack of customers, schools merge or shut down, medical services are minimal, employment options outside mining are almost non-existent. Even basic maintenance becomes difficult when skilled workers are no longer around. Another hidden issue is isolation cost. Groceries, fuel, and repairs are significantly more expensive due to distance. Internet reliability can be poor, making remote work difficult. For families, the lack of education and healthcare options becomes a deal breaker, regardless of how cheap the house is. This is why so many homes in these Perth-linked mining towns remain unsold for years. The market isn't undervaluing them, it's pricing in risk. Without economic diversity, long-term population growth, or essential services, cheap houses aren't opportunities. They're reminders of how fast prosperity can vanish when a town's future depends on a single industry. Number 4. Near Hobart. Beautiful, quiet, and slowly emptying. Tasmania is often sold as a peaceful escape, cool air, stunning landscapes, and a slower pace of life. Hobart, in particular, has gained attention for lifestyle buyers and creatives. But in 2026, there are towns not far from Hobart where houses sell for around $50,000, and the reason has little to do with beauty. It has everything to do with population decline and access. These towns were once supported by fishing, forestry, or small-scale manufacturing. Over time, those industries shrank or became more efficient, requiring fewer workers. Research on regional population trends shows Tasmania has some of the fastest-aging communities in Australia. Younger residents often leave for education or work and don't return, leaving behind shrinking populations and limited demand for housing. On the surface, these places look peaceful, quiet streets, historic homes, and scenic surroundings, but daily life can be difficult. Healthcare services are limited, with major hospitals concentrated in Hobart. Public transport is infrequent or non-existent. Employment opportunities are narrow, often seasonal, and lower paying. Even basic services like trades, childcare, or specialist repairs can involve long wait times or long drives. Another major factor is weather and isolation. Colder winters, shorter daylight hours, and rough travel conditions can make already isolated towns feel cut off for months at a time. Studies on rural well-being consistently show that isolation, especially among older populations, reduces long-term livability and discourages new residents from moving in. Housing prices reflect this reality. The buildings themselves are often solid and full of character, but the lack of future growth keeps demand weak. Investors stay away. Families choose towns with better schools and healthcare access. Over time, prices stagnate or fall further. Near Hobart, these cheap houses are not signs of untapped potential. They are signals of towns quietly shrinking. Beautiful to visit, calm to walk through, but increasingly difficult to build a stable, connected life in as the population slowly fades away. Number 3. Around Darwin. Extreme climate, extreme turnover. Darwin is unlike any other Australian city. It's tropical, remote, and deeply tied to defense, construction, and government contracts. On paper, that sounds stable. Yet in 2026, there are towns around Darwin where houses sell for around $50,000, and the reason comes down to a mix of climate pressure, isolation, and constant population churn. One of the biggest factors is heat and weather intensity. Scientific climate data shows the Northern Territory is experiencing longer heat seasons, higher humidity, and more extreme weather events. Living in these conditions isn't just uncomfortable, it's expensive. Cooling costs are high, maintenance is constant, and older homes deteriorate faster. Over time, many residents simply decide the lifestyle isn't sustainable long-term. Another issue is temporary residency. A large portion of the workforce around Darwin is rotational: defense personnel, contractors, and short-term government workers. They come for a few years and leave. Research into housing markets shows that areas with high population turnover struggle to build long-term demand. People rent, not buy. When contracts end, entire neighborhoods empty out. Employment options outside core Darwin are also limited. Smaller towns depend heavily on a narrow range of jobs, and if one project ends, there's often nothing to replace it. Healthcare access drops quickly outside the city, education options narrow, and families with children are often the first to leave. The houses themselves can be deceptively appealing: large blocks, quiet streets, plenty of space. But that space comes with distance from services, unreliable internet in some areas, and higher costs for everything from groceries to repairs. Isolation amplifies every small problem. This is why so many homes near Darwin sit unsold despite their low price. It's not that people don't see the value, it's that they understand the trade-off. In the top end, cheap housing reflects a lifestyle that many can handle temporarily, but very few are willing to commit to for the long haul. Number 2. Outside Brisbane, flood maps don't lie. Brisbane is often seen as one of Australia's fastest-growing and most affordable capital cities, especially compared to Sydney or Melbourne. But in 2026, there are towns beyond Brisbane where houses sell for around $50,000. And the reason is written clearly, not in real estate listings, but in flood maps and insurance data. Many of these towns sit inland or along river systems that have flooded repeatedly over the past decade. Climate research shows that extreme rainfall events in Queensland are becoming more frequent and more intense, turning once rare floods into regular threats. Each major flood pushes insurance premiums higher until coverage becomes unaffordable or unavailable altogether. At that point, demand collapses, no matter how cheap the house looks. To an untrained eye, these towns can seem like hidden gems, quiet streets, green surroundings, and solid homes at prices that feel impossible in today's market. But locals know the reality. Roads cut off during storms, businesses closing after repeated damage, families leaving after rebuilding for the third or fourth time. Over time, population drops and property values follow. Another overlooked factor is financing risk. Banks are increasingly cautious about lending in high-risk flood zones. Even if a buyer wants a $50,000 house, getting a mortgage can be difficult or impossible. That alone eliminates a huge portion of the market. Cash buyers remain, but most aren't willing to take on long-term environmental risk. Employment also plays a role. Many of these towns rely on agriculture or logistics, industries highly sensitive to weather disruption. When floods hit, work stops. Income becomes unstable. Younger residents move closer to Brisbane itself, where jobs and services are more reliable. This is why cheap houses outside Brisbane aren't being snapped up. The market isn't ignoring value, it's responding to risk. When climate data, insurance costs, and lending restrictions all point in the same direction, low prices aren't opportunities. They're signals that the cost of living there may be far higher than the price tag suggests. Number 1. Near Adelaide, aging towns with no one replacing them. Adelaide is often praised for its affordability, lifestyle, and steady pace compared to Australia's eastern capitals. But in 2026, there are towns not far from Adelaide where houses sell for around $50,000. And the reason has little to do with condition or scenery. It comes down to a quiet but powerful force: demographic collapse. Many of these towns were built decades ago around farming, small manufacturing, or local services. For years, they functioned well enough, but research into regional population trends shows a clear pattern across South Australia. Young people leave, and they don't come back. Education, jobs, and opportunity pull them toward Adelaide or interstate, while older residents remain. Over time, the population ages rapidly, and replacement simply doesn't happen. This shift changes everything. Schools lose enrollment and eventually close. Medical services become limited to visiting clinics. Shops reduce hours or shut down entirely. Without young families or new workers moving in, housing demand steadily declines. Even well-maintained homes struggle to attract buyers because the future population base is shrinking, not growing. From the outside, these towns can look deceptively stable: quiet streets, solid brick houses, familiar community layouts. But stability without renewal slowly turns into stagnation. Studies on housing markets consistently show that long-term demand depends on population inflow, not just affordability. When there's no new generation to take over, prices fall, sometimes permanently. Another issue is employment concentration. Jobs that once supported these towns have become centralized or automated. Residents who still work often commute long distances or rely on a narrow set of employers. That fragility makes new buyers cautious, especially families or investors looking for long-term security. This is how towns near Adelaide end up with shockingly cheap homes, not because they're unsafe or unlivable, but because the market recognizes a hard truth. Without people to replace those leaving, cheap housing becomes a reflection of a future that's slowly fading, rather than one that's about to grow. So here's the truth most property ads will never tell you. These $50,000 houses in Australia aren't hidden jackpots, they're signals. Signals of shrinking towns, disappearing jobs, rising climate risks, and communities slowly being left behind. Cheap property doesn't automatically mean smart buying. In many cases, it means you're paying less because the future is uncertain. If this video helped you see the housing market differently, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's really happening in 2026. And comment below, which of these towns shocked you the most? Your next smart decision starts with knowing the truth.